Hi, Bryn. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, it's an honour to have you on. You've had a successful career in sports journalism and commentary. Was there a moment you knew you wanted to work in sports media?
There was, yes, and it was quite a long time ago now because I was quite little and I used to enjoy listening to match commentaries on the radio because that was the way that you followed most of your football in those days. There was very, very little live football on the TV, so a couple of games a year basically. So usually you'd put the radio on and you'd get commentary on the radio. So I used to enjoy listening to. I was born in Liverpool, so I spent my first few years there. So Liverpool had a fantastic football team at the time. They won the first European Cup while I was in Liverpool. So there were loads of European games that they'd be playing in midweek. So they'd be traveling all over the place, and I would kind of go to bed because I was only small. School the next day, but I'd have the radio on under the covers, and I'd be listening to what was in those days BBC Radio 2 was where all the sport used to be. So they used to send commentary teams out to cover Liverpool. There was a commercial radio station in the city called Radio City with a guy called Clyde Tilsey was commentating on that. So Peter Jones and Alan Parry were the commentators on BBC Radio 2. They were a fantastic combination. Peter Jones was just a master of commentary, and I used to love listening to the words and how he would describe where he was, and you kind of felt like my eyes were closed anyway because I was meant to be asleep, but you felt like you were in the place that he was talking about. So it was all these exotic locations that they were commentating from, and that was what made me think, well, I like playing football, but I don't think I'm very good. So let's have a crack at talking about it instead, and that was where it began.
I know you're a Wrexham fan. How come you chose Wrexham over Liverpool or Everton?
Well, I moved from Liverpool quite early, so I left behind probably the best team in the world at that time to move to a town just across the border called Wrexham, where they also had a football team that at that time was playing at second tier level. And so, although it didn't look like a fair swap in terms of the teams, the first weekend after I'd moved to Wales, to North Wales, I went to watch with my family. I went to watch Wrexham play, and they won the game against Blackburn, and I quite enjoyed it. So, although I'd been to Anfield by then and watched Liverpool. So I'd been to games before that, but it was on my doorstep now, and it was much easier to, obviously in those days, to get tickets to watch Wrexham than it was Liverpool. It was almost impossible to get tickets to watch Liverpool. So this just seemed like a sort of a sensible alternative. So I started supporting Wrexham, and that's where it began. It was quite straightforward, really. So for a time, there was kind of a dual allegiance. My dad would take me back sometimes to go and watch Liverpool, but as the years passed and I started going on my own, then I would go on my own to watch Wrexham, or I'd go with mates to watch Wrexham. So that's where the balance shifted then.
Yeah. Well, you went to university and studied English and drama and journalism courses. Did these help you later on to get your foot in the door?
Well, that was the whole plan. The plan was to go and do things that were going to be useful to me when I finished when I went out into the world of work to try and do the thing I wanted to do. So even before I went to university, I started to do things that I thought would be useful in terms of what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was be a football commentator. So while I was at school, I was involved in things like drama, which I really enjoyed there. But that was good because that's kind of performance, and you got to, deliver and all the rest of it. You got to be confident in talking in front of people. So I was doing that. I also did stuff like they used to run a talking newspaper for the blind at my secondary school. So I used to go in early on a Friday morning, and we recorded this talking newspaper, which was distributed to people with visual disabilities in the sort of the area around the school. So it was a regular thing that I was doing. That was useful. And then even before I'd left school, I got the opportunity to actually start commentating because the local hospital radio service in Wrexham advertised for commentators, and I volunteered my services, and they took me on. So I was actually doing commentaries while I was still at school on Wrexham games. And then I did a degree course that I thought would do those things that I'd mentioned. So I did the drama bit for the performance element. and I did the English bit because it's words. So so that's what the degree was all about. I really enjoyed doing it, but it was it was very much with I wasn't thinking of being an actor, and I wasn't thinking of being a writer. I was thinking of being a football commentator. And then the postgrad course was just the kind of icing on the cake, because that was one of the very few journalism courses that you could do at the time. You couldn't do a journalism degree. There were no 3-year degrees in journalism at that time, so you had to go to a postgrad course after you'd done a degree. So I got on the one at Lancs Poly in Preston, and that was good because it was broadcast journalism, which is what I wanted to do, rather than written journalism, newspaper journalism. So I got to be a bit more specific in terms of how I was focusing to get the next bit. So I trained to be a news journalist off that. That's what that course was. There was no sporting element to it. But my first placement I did whilst I was on that course, which was with a commercial radio station back in Wrexham, which served the sort of Wrexham area plus Cheshire and a bit of Merseyside. And they covered 3 teams, Tranmere, Wrexham and Chester, and they sent me off to do some football stuff for them. I did an interview with Mickey Thomas. So that was my very first ever player interview. And then I got sent off. They asked me, did I fancy reporting on a game? So I got sent to, not to commentate, but just to sort of provide updates on a game for them whilst I was on the placement. And they said after I'd finished the placement, well, do you want to carry on doing the updates, the game updates for us? Because there's probably some availability on that basis. And once I'd finished the placement, actually, they said they would pay me to do those. So I actually got the chance to report on games, not to commentate on games, quite early. And then that actually led to the first commentary, because when I'd finished the course, I was looking for a kind of full-time employment, but they offered me freelance work. So I was going and doing news shifts for them. And at the same time, they were also still offering me games to go and report on. And then one weekend, it was an FA Cup weekend, and they had the 3 teams, because they're all lower league teams, they had the 3 teams involved in round 1 of the FA Cup. And the guy who was the sport news editor said, right, we're going to do commentary on the second half of one of the 3 of our 3 clubs this weekend. We're going to make the decision at half time. So we'll look at which game offers the best prospect of a good 45 minutes worth of football, most exciting tie, if you like. And he asked me if I wanted to do the Wrexham game, and Wrexham were playing Winsford. So there's potential shock. So of course I said yes. So I was sent off to the game. So I just did updates in the first half, and at half time they made the decision on which game they were going to do. The Wrexham game was 2-2. So Winsford, of whatever league they were in, were doing really well against a football league team. So they picked that game. So the second half commentary was the first commentary I did. So that was less than 12 months after finishing the postgrad. In fact, it was 6 months after finishing the postgrad course. So I actually got to do the thing that I wanted to do from being 7 years old. At the age of, 21 or whatever I was then. I was commentating on the radio on an actual game. So the path that I'd kind of followed worked pretty well, to be honest. And I got to do another commentary. So Wrexham won that game. So they went to round 2, and they did the same arrangement for the second round. So I was waiting at half time. I got the nod again. Wrexham were playing Telford this time, and it was 0-0. And Telford were a really good non-league side, so there was a real chance of an upset in this one. But in the second half, Wrexham won it 1-0 with a late goal. So they were through to round 3. And in round 3, I was watching the draw later that evening, because they did it late on the Saturday night at the end of match of the day. And I was in a pub watching the draw, and it came out as Wrexham will play Arsenal in round 3. And so it looked like maybe I'd absolutely dropped the plum tie here. Wrexham against Arsenal. And then before that took place, so this was in November, early December, before that happened, in January, I got offered a job in working for BBC Radio Cumbria in Barrow-in-Furness. So I had to take it because I was only getting occasional freelance shifts from Marchesand, this commercial station. So I went off to Barrow, and I wasn't working for them anymore on the day that Wrexham beat Arsenal. I was standing on the cot watching it as a fan, but not commentating on it. So I missed out on the big one there. Took a professional decision, and that's the way it goes, kind of thing.
Like you mentioned there, you watched that game as a fan instead of commentating. when you commentate, can you enjoy it as a fan, or because you're professional as well, like so? What's the difference there?
Well, the big difference is probably swearing. So this last weekend, after we were talking, I went to watch Ipswich v Wrexham on Saturday, and then I was commentating on Leeds v Villa on Sunday. So the way I react to like a poor refereeing decision or a bad pass is a bit different from Saturday to Sunday, and generally the difference would be the swearing. So the emotion might be similar, but the delivery is different. And there is a difference. I mean, it's the emotion that you. So I still pay to go and watch football matches. So I was standing in the rain at Ipswich on Saturday, got soaking wet through the course of the game, 0-0 draw, and then a 4-hour drive home afterwards. And I paid for the privilege. So I'm not one of the people who gets to, rock up at a car park, which is, I do when I'm working, but a car park right outside the ground, and then you walk in and you get fed before the game and your seats under cover and all the rest of it. There are people whose existence around watching football is like that. That isn't my experience still. I'm still kind of out there roughing it, if you like. And so I hopefully still understand the difference between the privileged position of sitting on the gantry and sitting down below, where you've paid for your ticket and you've maybe had a rotten journey to get there and it's cost you a fortune and all the rest of it. And you've done it because you support your team. So that bit, hopefully I still understand. And that's the bit that I try and hopefully channel into commentaries, but the language is different. And although there is emotion involved, so you're absolutely thrilled when a goal goes in and you're less than thrilled when a goal goes against, because we're doing Leeds United based commentary. It's not neutral, this. So I wouldn't do the same commentary if I was doing a commentary as I used to do for Sky Sports. Different again. But in this instance, you've got the ability to put emotion into it, because Leeds fans would expect that, because it's LUTV, for God's sake. But at the same time, it can't be the end of the world. It can be the best thing you've ever seen, but it can't be the end of the world, because you've got to come back and do it all again next week.
Yeah.
And so you've got to kind of, from a mental health perspective as well, in a way, you've got to kind of be able to cope with the bad stuff as much as you enjoy the good stuff, because it's a long process. So if you're thinking, like this season, 38 games in the Premier League, so we are whatever number of games in now, you've got loads more to do. And what we know for a certainty in Leeds, in case this season, is that they're going to get beaten a lot more times. Now, I don't know how many times they're going to win, hopefully a few, but we know for almost certain that they're going to get beaten quite often, unlike the last two seasons. So you have to kind of factor that into your thinking, because if you kind of say that's it, this is, you can't throw the towel in, because you've got to come back and do it again next week.
Especially with this run we've got coming up as well.
Well, yeah. So we know. I mean, this is one of the challenges of doing in-house commentary as opposed to neutral commentary. If I was going to Manchester City Leeds and doing it for Sky Sports, the outcome is not important to me. I mean, it might be. I might be commentating, as a closet Leeds United fan, but it's not what I'm declaring publicly. And I know commentators who support teams, and I've done commentaries with Wrexham games where I'm kind of in the seat of the opposition. So when I was working at Radio Leeds, I did Bradford Wrexham, I did Huddersfield Wrexham, I did Halifax Wrexham for commentaries for BBC Radio Leeds. So in every one of those instances, I was favouring the West Yorkshire side, because that's who the service was provided for. So you kind of squash it down. If God forbid, if Leeds ever end up playing Wrexham, it's not out yet, but then I have to aim to do the same thing in that. So you kind of approach it. If it's a neutral approach to this thing, then the fact that Manchester City win easily, which might happen, is, well, that's okay, because that's the outcome, that's the result. They're a good side. Leeds have struggled. Manchester City win easily. This story is about Manchester City. The story is about, have they closed the gap on Arsenal? Those are the kind of things that you'd be talking about. You mentioned the fact that Leeds were in in trouble in the bottom three or whatever, but really the focus and the story will be around about Manchester City. So that doesn't involve emotion. That's just analysis. So the emotion might be around, oh, that was a brilliant goal, but that's it in that moment, and then you move on and the game carries on, and you keep describing what you're seeing, kind of thing. When you're doing the club commentary, obviously you don't have that, and I'd call it a luxury of being able to kind of switch off in quite the same way, because this matters. The outcome matters for Leeds United, regardless. The Man City bit, not interested in. So the other challenge with that is then that if you go into the game, here we are a couple of days before it, you're thinking this is going to be really quite difficult. And we have evidence for it because 2 seasons, or 2 visits ago, I should say, not 2 seasons ago, Leeds were 2 down inside 13 minutes at Manchester City, and we knew they were on a poor run of form at the time anyway. And I've watched enough football, and I've got Tony Dorigo, who's played and watched, is brilliant. And we both had that real sense that Leeds were going to get a proper pasting here, because we could just tell from the game vibes in those first 13 minutes, and Manchester City were already 2-0 up, that this was going to be a long, long night. And it was, because they scored 5 more. And that's obviously the heaviest defeat I've ever commentated on for any team, I think. Matched only by Leeds beating Cardiff by 7 last season. But that's hard, because when you're doing that in that circumstance, the way this game's going. It's only going one way. So the only question is, how many goals are Manchester City going to score, frankly, and realistically. And so you're just kind of waiting for that to play out. And that's actually quite difficult to do from a club commentary perspective, because you've got to keep talking. You can't just... We were joking about this on Saturday, Tony and I, saying, if it doesn't go well in the early stages, should we just pack up and play some music instead or something? Because obviously you can't do that. You just got to... I don't know whether anyone's still with it or not, but you've got to keep going. You've got to keep going right till the bitter end. And that's the challenge. It wasn't a challenge last season, because we had exactly the opposite scenario. Leeds won pretty much every game last season, but now we're paying the price for that enjoyment that we had there with something completely different.
Yeah, exactly. Well, your journey with Leeds started at Radio Leeds, like you said, but you had to work your way up, didn't you, at Radio Leeds? Like, you was working on news journalism at first, and you built your way up into commentary.
That's it. Well, the route into the industry in those days was to be a news reporter first. So you trained in there was no sports journalism course. So most people who got into journalism, broadcast journalism in those days, actually started as newspaper journalists and then converted. It's slightly different. By the time I arrived there was a recognition that you could train as a broadcast journalist. So that's what I did. So that was good. That took me sort of one step further on, because I didn't really want to work for a newspaper. So I came out of the course as a news journalist, trained up as a news journalist, and then worked in all my sort of first 3 roles at Marchesound as a freelance, mainly as a news journalist, and then completely as a news journalist when I went to work for BBC Radio Cumbria. So I did 6 months there, I think, as a news journalist, even though there's no news in that part of the world. That was quite difficult. But then when I arrived in Leeds, they had a role that was like a new hybrid job that they'd created, because they were relaunching the breakfast show, Radio Leeds. It was the summer after the championship win. And so Leeds were obviously big story, big news, and they were always very important to the radio station anyway. But they created a new breakfast show, and the idea was that they had somebody... Well, first of all, the idea was that there was no music played anymore. It was just talk. So it was all talk. And it was the first, as far as I'm aware, it was the first all talk breakfast show in the UK. So I think they used BBC Radio Leeds as a bit of a kind of an experiment ahead of the launch of 5 Live, which was obviously an all talk news station. So Radio Leeds was I think the kind of the place that they pushed it out first, because we overnight they stopped playing music on BBC Radio Leeds. They'd always played music before, so it was chat, record, guest, record, that kind of thing. Now there's no more music, so all talk. So the breakfast show was relaunched on this basis, and they wanted a dedicated sports person, a person with sports knowledge, I should say, to work on the breakfast show. So they advertised for that role. In fact, I'd already been for another a job interview there for a sports job, which I didn't get because a guy called Peter Drury got it. He did okay, and I did enough in the interview then for them to say actually it was pretty good. That, I mean, Peter was a shoo-in for the job, but they said what you've done there's pretty good. I had to do some commentary for it, and so they said, listen, we're going to keep you on the books, so if another opportunity comes up, we'll give you a shout. So when this job came along, and I applied for it, I was in a good position to get it from the sports perspective. So I did get the job, and so I had to go in and do sports news in the morning, like produce the sports bulletin and present the sports bulletin. And the idea was that if something happened overnight, like Leeds United were linked with a player or I don't know, whatever, I was the one who would be able to spot that and pick it out of the newspapers in those days. So then I'd be able to reflect that, and we'd be able to react to it in terms of the following morning sports bulletin. So what you weren't getting was something that was put together the night before. You were reactive, flexible, ready to there's a big story breaking at Leeds United this morning. So it's exactly like people have heard since on something like Sky Sports News. That's become the norm now, that you don't just wait for things. You kind of sport became, at this point, sport became a big thing. More than sport, it became like a news thing as well. And so like a news story you'd react to and say, oh my God, there's been a fire, you better go and cover it, which I also had to go and do. They might say, oh, there's transfer speculation around Eric Cantona. Can we get a guest on about that? Who should we get on? And I'd have to do that as well. News and sport had never been aligned like that previously. News was always the most important, and it was the front page, if you like, and sport was always on the back page. So this kind of concept, this new experiment, brought them almost equal together. So that's what I was doing. I was there to cover anything that happened in the world of sport, but mainly I was there to go out and cover house fires, burglaries, all the usual newsy type stuff. And I was in every morning early because I was on a permanent early. So I was 6 till 2 shift. So I was in at 5:30, say, every morning. I might be out, I'd record the sports bulletin and I might leave it there, which kind of negated the idea of being ready to react to breaking sports stories, but that's the way it worked out. And I'd get sent out to cover a house fire or whatever. So I'd schlep up and down West Yorkshire with this radio car that they had with a great big aerial on the roof and report from wherever this thing was happening, whatever it was. And they wanted, it was exactly like Five Live became. They wanted the idea of, we've got a reporter who, there's a big story, so we will send our breakfast show report out, we'll go and cover that story. So that's what I had to do. It's actually good training. I didn't really enjoy it because I didn't want to do it. It's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a news reporter. But it was good training because much later, when the Sky Sports News opportunity came around, I was already trained up as a news journalist. I'd done legal training. I'd done all the things that you were meant to do to be able to be a sort of successful news reporter. I'd already done all that, and I'd done a lot of live news reporting. So I wasn't. There were people around who had just only ever done sport. I wasn't that guy, so that actually became useful because actually when I was at Sky Sports News, it was much more like BBC Radio Leeds in many ways because I wasn't doing much commentating for a long time. But I was doing a lot of reporting. So I was standing outside football grounds talking about stuff. And that was much more like I'd been doing on the BBC Radio Leeds breakfast show.
Well, you were on the plane with the squad when the plane nearly crashed in 98. So is that like journalism you mentioned there? You brought the news, didn't you? So did something like what you were doing before at Radio Leeds like help you with how to break that news?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It did. That's the perfect example to cite, is that I was the only reporter on the plane when it came down. And so I had the duty. I could have sat there and gone, oh, that was lucky, we all survived, and just left it at that. But I knew I couldn't do that because I was a reporter, I was a journalist. So I had a story to tell. And I was the guy. It's very rare for the journalist to actually be part of the story. So I was on the plane, so I had to then relay that fact. So I phoned. We were driving from the crash site with the plane still on fire behind us, and I borrowed a phone off David Weatherall, who was one of the players at the time, and I made a call to BBC Radio to the HQ, and then got through from the switchboard to the newsroom. And a guy I used to work with at BBC Radio Leeds was in the newsroom, as it turned out, coincidentally. So I said hello to him, and then said, right, I've been in a plane crash. The Leeds United team has been in a plane crash. And we were literally still on the tarmac. And he said, okay, I'll put you straight on. And so I was then reporting from, I don't know, if I could still see the plane on fire. So that was the news training, because you've got to sort of stay calm under pressure. You've got to find the right words to use. We just got off. We nearly died, literally minutes before. But you've got to do your job at this stage. So I've done lots of live report, because obviously every football match, anything can happen in a live football match, right? So yes, a game gets played, but anything can happen. Players have died in live football matches. You cannot predict. It's live. You cannot predict the outcome. It might be normal, but it might not. And so you do. If you've worked as a news reporter, you've always kind of got that. I might not just be doing sports reporting today. I might be doing a different type of report. And I've had it a number of times in my career. So I was in Istanbul when the two Leeds lads got murdered. So we went out to cover that as a football match, and it ended up being those kind of, those really sad, awful reports back about the events of the night. We'd been outside the hospital when it was announced, all the rest of it. So yes, I was a football reporter, but I had to be ready to switch to be the thing that I trained as at any time. So the plane crash was the first example of that, and I saw another side to it, because as the coach, when we finally got brought back from the Stansted where the plane had crashed and got brought back up to Leeds, when we arrived at Leeds sort of 6 a.m. or whatever next morning, there were hordes of journalists waiting at Leeds to interview people who'd been on the plane, and all the players hadn't actually come back to Ellen Road. They'd gone up to Leeds Bradford Airport, so the media had gathered in the wrong place. So when we got off the bus, because we were on a separate bus to the players, so it was me and some of the kind of backroom staff and some corporate fans, but no players, which is obviously most people would have been wanted to interview. So they had to make do with what got off the second coach, and I was one of those who got off that. So then, having reported it, then I was getting interviewed about it as well. And then lots of newspapers got in touch to get my sort of story around it, and I wrote up a piece for one of the national newspapers and all the rest of it. So it was a news job. And actually, somebody at Sky Sports News, which hadn't launched as a channel at that time, it was in the planning, and somebody saw the reporting of it, and it was that got me the next job that I went to a few months later at Sky Sports News, because they'd seen the way I'd reported on this crash.
Really? I didn't know that. That's what got you the job, yeah.
Yeah.
What was that? Must have been terrifying. What was it? Did the engine just blow up?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, I'm not a technical person, but that seems to be it in a nutshell. So when the plane took off, the engine blew up, and so there's loads of flames and fire coming off it, and bits coming off it, and we could all see it, and we could feel the heat from it. So it was a propeller-driven plane. So the pilot was able to go up on one engine, and then decided when he got up, he had a choice of either he was meant to fly higher to try and start the fire in the engine of oxygen, but he had another choice, which was to bring the plane down as quickly as possible in case the engine was on fire, but I guess it hadn't actually exploded at that point. It hadn't kind of blown up, because if it did blow up, it took the wing with it, and then we were done, because we were 200 feet up in the air at the point to which he brought it back down again. So he came straight back down and just about made a calculation that Stansted is the longest runway in the UK. And just about caught the end of the tarmac with the wheels as we came down. So that just meant that there was something like a regular surface that he landed on. It didn't stop the plane. The plane bounced. and may have bounced again. And by this time, it was actually on the grass now, and we were not very far away from the M11. The M11, which was very close to Stansted runway anyway, but we could see the cars going up and down on the M11, and the plane came to a stop, nose down, tail up in the air, on the grass beyond the end of the runway, with the engine still on fire. So we had to we'd done all the stuff that they tell you about, on the flights when they say, if we could have your attention, please, we'll go through the pre-flight instruction. Well, we did all that stuff for real. We were heads down between our legs, crouched down and tucked into the seats, and then we were get off the plane as quickly as possible. We think the engine's going to blow. So we'd done all that, and we all got off. So it was, in the end, it was a happy ending.
Yeah, very lucky, really. So, do you not like you mentioned there you're on the plane with the squad? Did you get along with all the players and the squads and things over the years?
Yeah, mostly it's been great. And occasionally there's been, it would tell you when it was difficult from a Leeds United perspective. It was difficult when I was now at Sky, and I was tasked with covering all the collapse after the brilliant bit where European Cup semi-final and all the rest of it. But when the financial collapse that followed, I was outside of Leeds United on a regular basis, sort of day in, day out, basically. And obviously, as things were getting worse and worse, there were stories about how much the players were earning and how much the club was in debt. And the kind of what was being inferred was it was the players, these high salaries that the players were on, that was dragging the club down. And that was kind of the message we were being fed from those within the club at the time, who were sort of struggling to keep the whole thing going. And the players, some of the players were, I was reporting, I was getting messages from all sides at that time. People were telling me all sorts of stuff because there were takeovers being muted, and I was constantly going to interview accountants or the people who were in charge of the football club, and I was in insolvency offices and with administrators and all the rest of it. So this is back to being miles away from being a football reporter. I learned about flat pack administration and these kind of sort of business terms, that because that's what I was doing day to day. I was like a business correspondent by this stage rather than a football reporter. Certainly wasn't doing any commentaries at this point. So all that got pretty heavy duty. So I got some stick from some of the players who felt that they'd been unfairly labelled as being kind of instigators of the crash, if you like. Not the air crash, the financial crash, the next crash. So that made life a little bit awkward on occasion. But by and large, that's the exception rather than the rule. By and large, I've made a lot of, friends, hopefully you describe them as, through the years doing stuff. I was doing it most closely in those initial years in the 90s when I was doing every game for BBC Radio Leeds. I was travelling, I've been with the team then. I was doing a lot of work for the club as well, and so I was hosting events for them and stuff. So I got to meet and talk to a lot of people. Had my battles with Howard Wilkinson.
Oh, really?
He was as difficult as anybody I've dealt with, Howard. And at one point he threatened to ban me from going along to do Leeds stuff, but I had to negotiate my way through that one. Which actually worked out quite well. We got on better at the end of that little hiatus. We got on better after it than we had before it, frankly. And since then, we've been okay. But that got a bit tricky for a while because the manager's the one who you're interfacing with most, because you're going maybe twice a week plus post-match stuff to talk to them. So that relationship is kind of the key one. George Graham didn't really kind of engage much, but he was okay. And various loads of managers have come in since, some of whom I've worked a lot with, others who I've come in through the door and I've probably never even met some of them, because when Leeds were kind of in the doldrums, third division and all the rest of it, Sky weren't that interested, because it got to the point where a third division side, as big as Leeds were still a third division side nevertheless, regularly changing managers, and then crazy people kind of tending to be in charge of the club. That occasion, that was a bit of, it was really quite depressing, because Leeds became an object of fun for other people watching, an object of comedy really, because the stories were all about the mad things that were happening at the football club, not the good things that were happening at the football club. And so that period was one where I wasn't really around the club too much at that stage. I was doing some games mainly for Soccer Saturday, but the week to week stuff, the day to day stuff that I had been doing in the Premier League, there was no interest in London for any of that stuff really. So occasionally, we'd go along and interview Chilino or Ken Bates or whoever. You get some kind of mad stuff back, and but that apart, there wasn't much kind of interest in what was going on around the football side of things at that point. So I was being sent everywhere else in all the other clubs in Yorkshire and the North East or even the North West. But yeah, so in that initial stage, so someone like Tony Dorigo, I got to know in that first stage when I was at BBC Radio Leeds, and I knew he was a really good guy because whenever Leeds lost, you have certain players that you would go to in those circumstances who you could rely on, who wouldn't tell you to piss off because they were annoyed because they'd lost. And there were some players who would do that. So I learned fairly quickly to identify who they were, but equally I learned to identify who the ones who might help me out, even in the trying circumstances were. So Tony Grigo, David Weatherall, then Lucas Radebe, Gary Speed, people like that were the ones who were always amenable and helpful. And so Tony and I got on well way back then. And then, so the fact that we now sit alongside each other doing the match commentaries all these years later just feels like picking up where we left off effectively. So you do kind of build relationships to an extent with some of the guys. I got to know Simon Grayson well, I get on well with Simon. I've done stuff with him beyond Leeds United stuff because I do coach training, coach education work. And so Simon's been on the course for that. There's quite a few other people that I've come into contact with as players and now as coaches have also been involved with stuff like that. So that helps because you see them in a different environment. You're not just seeing them in the tunnel at the end of a game when the adrenaline's pumping. You see them when everything's a bit more relaxed and they're actually studying or trying to improve, or you're trying to help them improve. So then that's when you kind of tend to build a good, strong relationship with people when you've got a bit of time and they learn to trust you. That's the key bit, that they've got a sense that they can trust you. Then that helps on that basis. And that's always been important from my perspective, to try and establish that trust with people. And it takes time and it doesn't always go. So Sky Sports News might want a big story, but on occasion I'd go, well, I don't think this is really worth it for me, because I get short-term gain, I get short-term plaudits for something that I've learned, that maybe something I've heard that maybe I shouldn't have heard, that I then report on. But if it impacts on my longer-term relationship with the person that I'm dealing with, say a manager or something, then that means I might be back in that situation I was with Howard Wilkinson and briefly with Dennis Wise, where he doesn't want me coming along anymore and he's not going to help me. So I've always worked on the basis that I had to try and have a relationship with the manager, so I could actually occasionally ring them and say, listen, I need a bit of a favour here. We need an interview doing today. Will you help? And mostly they go, yeah, okay, yeah, no problem. Come along and we'll do something. That's where I wanted to always be at in that situation. So that isn't to say there weren't hard interviews to do occasionally with people I knew. There were, but overall, I wanted them to feel that I was kind of on their side, if you like.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned there one of the good guys was Gary Speed, a good friend of yours. He's 14 years on Thursday since he died, which is, it's gone really quick actually, thinking about it. But what was that like for you? Because there's that Sky Sports clip of you outside Ellen Road that does the rounds, and that must have been very tough.
Yeah, that's the hardest day I've had at work, without any question. And as I've already mentioned, there have been some pretty tough days, to be honest with you. But that was the hardest because, again, you find yourself in a story in which you've kind of got some involvement. It's not a detached exercise. So he was a pal. He was somebody that I'd got to know when I arrived at Leeds as a young reporter. He was the same age as me, so we'd got on well. I'm a Wales fan. He played for Wales, so I wanted to be his friend, if you like. There's a bit of that that element of being, oh, look, there's Gary Speed, and that's how it worked out, because he's such a nice guy, and he was one of the very first footballers. I talked about that trust element. He was one of the very first footballers I think it was the first at Leeds United, who gave me, there was a new thing called a mobile phone just coming out, and the players were just starting to get hold of mobile phones. But prior to that, the way to get hold of a player that wasn't through the club was to have their home phone number. And he gave me his home phone number. And that was a real sign that there was, that he trusted that I wasn't going to misuse that. I wasn't going to distribute it to my pals or whatever, or ring him at, midnight on a Saturday or something. So I had Gary's number. So that was an important sort of step for a journalist. That's a big step. So that was part of our becoming friends, because, I did have a route to him then, and would occasionally ring him. And then when mobile phones came in, I had his mobile phone number. And then when text messages became a thing, we exchanged text messages. And that you're generally not doing that with footballers. That's not the norm. It's not a regular occurrence to be doing something like that, to have that sort of direct and regular contact. But we got on well with each other. I got to know members of the family. I got to know his dad pretty well. And so that developed through his time at Leeds United. And then he went to other clubs, and I would watch him play for Wales still. And then I got the role as the Wales correspondent for Sky. And all of a sudden, we were back working together again effectively, because he was captain of Wales. We did Wales interviews, so I was interviewing him, and we picked up where we left off effectively in terms of the relationship. And then when he retired from international football, he was Sky's studio guest for all the Wales games. So then we were working together then, because I was working on all of those as well. So that developed, and we had like time together in Cardiff, and we had some nights out and all the rest of it. And it was great. It was brilliant. And then the next step of all of that was that when he went into management and he went to Sheffield United, the Wales manager, John Toshak, lost his job, and there was a vacancy. And he'd only just gone into Sheffield United as the manager. And I got wind of the fact that Wales were interested in appointing him, but they weren't going to approach him because he was under contract. So they assumed that he wouldn't be interested. So he wasn't linked with the job at all, Gary, which was surprising, but he wasn't. So I mentioned to him that I thought there was interest from the Welsh side, and that he said, well, yeah, okay, we'll let them know I am interested. And that began the various twists and turns between that and the appointment being made. But that's kind of the process, as far as I'm aware, that led to them taking the first step of approaching him or his representatives to say, would you be interested? So he ended up as the Wales manager, and he invited me down to Cardiff. I was going down to Cardiff anyway, but he invited me, took me out for a dinner to say thanks for helping, and then he was the Wales manager, so we were doing a load of stuff together around that. And again, I had that phone number, so I was able to ring him if something came up. He was able to ring me, and he did that ahead of his first qualifier, I think it was. Ahead of a game against England for sure. Anyway, I don't know if that was the first qualifier. And there was a problem in the camp that he wanted to explain successfully to the media. So he called me very early one morning and said, oh, what do you think I should do with this? And this is what I'm thinking. And so we talked it through. And then something else happened a few games later, whereby something happened with a player that I thought, I rang him and said, I think you should react to this. And so he said, okay, yeah, come over to the house today. So he was living in Cheshire. So I drove over, and we did an interview there. And he said, you're the first journalist who's ever come and done an interview at my house. And that was like, wow, all the years he'd been in the game and all the interviews he'd done. But that was weeks before he took his own life. And that was, I was in the house where he took his own life. So there was we arrived at that point on that day, that date that you've mentioned, with absolutely no sense of anything being out of the ordinary. And because everything up till that point had been so ordinary and so straightforward, and the World Cup draw had taken place, and he was out in Brazil for it, and he was texting me during the World Cup draw as each team came out. And at the end of it, we both agreed that it looked like Wales had a half decent chance here, because they were doing so well, playing so well at the time. And he was really bringing in the young players, and they were coming through. And finally, there was like potential and hope there around Welsh football. They climbed up the rankings and all sorts. So we were sharing optimistic messages, and then Wales stuffed Norway 4-1 in a friendly, and they played really well. And that was the real sign that there was something exciting happening here. And we did the post-match after that, and that was the last time I ever spoke to him. And so we were both a bit giddy. A pal of mine remarked on it watching the interview. He said, you both look like you're about to burst out laughing, because we were kind of excited about what we were seeing here and the prospects for Welsh football. And then I got the call from Sky to say, we're hearing Gary Speed's dead. Can you check it out? And it just, he sent me a text message the day before. It just did not, none of it made any sense. It just didn't fit with anything that had happened up to that point. And so that was the case for anybody who knew him, I think, or for the vast majority of people who knew him. All the people I've spoken to have all said similar things. Just could not have ever seen it, predicted it, or anything. It just came complete sort of shock and surprise, bolt from the blue for everybody.
Well, he was on Football Focus the day before as well, wasn't he? And the presenter on there said he was just his usual self.
Yeah, so he'd done all the things. I've told this bit many times. In fact, it's on the clip that you talk about, the YouTube clip. But he always used to send me this text about, because we were the same age, and he was such an incredibly handsome man. So you'd walk into a room with him, and all heads would turn because he was kind of that. It was like that, and he used to make this joke about my hair. My hair had gone grey and then white, and so he always used to say, "See the first snow of the winter's just fallen in West Yorkshire." And that was like an ongoing thing. I would get that text from him on a regular basis. And so I got that text the day before. I was doing Leeds v Barnsley at Ellen Road. And he sent me that text in the first half. So he'd obviously done Football Focus. And I assume he'd gone home. And he was now watching Soccer Saturday on the box. So there's a Welsh player playing for Barnsley. And so I sent him a little kind of update on how the player had been doing in the game so far. She didn't reply to, and that was our last interaction of any kind. And then the next thing I was doing was ringing his phone number the next morning to try and hoping that he was going to answer, to be able to say to me, "No, it's a load of nonsense. Of course, I'm not dead." But obviously that didn't happen. And then I made another call to somebody from the Welsh FA, and they confirmed it. And then everything just went very, very bad for the rest of that day. And then I had the challenge of doing what happened the next day. I mean, the backstory to that is that I had people at Sky Sports News calling me through the Sunday, as it was when it was announced, saying, "Are you going to go to Leeds to cover this tomorrow?" And I was in a real mess, and I wasn't really in any sort of state to provide a response to that, frankly, but they kept asking. And in the end, I said, well, I thought to myself, well, it's probably better that I, because I knew Gary's dad in particular, it's probably better that I do go and do this, because I have a sense of what this actually, to me, this isn't a football story. To me, this is a story about a man who was a husband, son, father, brother, who'd tragically taken his own life. That's what the story was to me. It wasn't football star dies. It was kind of, there was much more to it than that as I was seeing it. So I just thought it would probably be better if that was reflected, rather than that just people said, "Oh, it's a great loss for football," because in a way it really wasn't it was a great loss for football. But football just carries on. There are other football and stuff. The cataclysmic loss was about the people who he'd left behind. That was the loss, like his sons, Eddie and Tommy. So that was the aim of the exercise, but it was a brutally hard day, because obviously we were at Ellen Road for most of it, and even as I arrived in darkness, what was it, late November, wasn't it? So I was there about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the flowers were already appearing around the foot of the Bremner statue, and people were coming and standing. We were right by the Bremner statue. People were coming and standing to lay flowers or cards down or scarves or shirts or whatever. And I was there, so people would come and have a conversation with me. And, so that's where you were right in the midst of this thing that was now developing, in terms of that people were coming to terms with, trying to get to come to terms with what was happening. So they wanted to talk about it. Absolutely, they did. My phone was ringing constantly. I had Talk Sport ringing up and asking for stuff, and loads of that kind of people wanting sort of journalistic reaction, perhaps, as somebody who was sort of known to had a good link with Gary, or a good, being friends with Gary. So I had all that going on. I had people, conversations with people, and I was trying to do, I was doing reports constantly in the meantime as well. I had to race back to the studio to edit a piece together from the footage that we had, and then went back to do more at Ellen Road. And after like 12 hours of it, that's the point. That's the YouTube clip, basically. So at that point, I was I think my head had gone, basically. And, well, it had. And so I was, I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. And I suppose that's what you see. I mean, the postscript to all that is that piece, as you mentioned, does, that clip that you've mentioned does come up. And I think probably will reappear again in the next few days. And I've been out and about, obviously, since, and I've had quite a number of occasions, a lot of occasions, where people have come up to me and said, "Oh, I've seen the clip, the Gary Speed clip." And I've had quite a few fairly young guys come up and say, who probably would have, well, if they barely knew who Gary Speed was, would have been very, very young when it all happened. But I've had people come up and say, "Oh, can I just say it was I've been going through a few problems. I've had a few problems myself. It was quite helpful, or it was it meant a lot to me watching that." And if that is the case, then at least I can reflect on that as a sort of a small positive, because I think what I think it maybe shows, and maybe you don't see this, it's very easy to stand there and say he took his own life, he leaves behind da 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 da, and kind of you deliver it as a report, as a news journalist. That's how you'd be expected to deliver a message like that. But in this instance, this was the guy who'd sent me the text message before. We'd known each other for years. We got on really, really well. We'd spent nights out together. We had all that stuff. I knew his dad. And I'd met his two sons. I had all that extra bit. And so what you actually seeing there, to a little extent, I'm not saying it's anything like it was with the family, but you're just getting a bit of a snapshot of the impact that suicide has on the people left behind. I think that's what you're seeing there. So a lot of people who take their own life, I'm told, because I've done quite a lot of reading about this sort of stuff since, have it in their head that the best thing they can do now, for everybody's sake, is to leave, is to go. And they rationalize around that thought that it's better for everybody that they're not around anymore. And of course, that's absolutely not the case. That couldn't be further from the case. What Gary left behind wasn't better. It was terrible what he left behind. I've seen the impact. I've been with the family since. I was at the funeral. I saw what was left behind, and it was no way was that better. And you think, like, if Gary could see that, if he could have had a snapshot into what the implications and the damage that this was going to cause for the people he loved, if he could see that, it would have made a difference in terms of the process that his mind must have gone through for him to take the decision he took.
The outpouring he got as well, like you see the pictures, Shea Given crying on the pitch. There's obviously the clip with you. And like you say, was Wales manager as well at the peak of his managerial career. You just never know. Do you think there should be more done for mental health in general, but in football as well? Do you think there should be more done with men as well?
Well, again, the minor positives, but one of the things that has definitely happened, the consequence of this, is that there has been a lot more focus on men's mental health. And people have, I think it took this awful thing, this catastrophic act, to alert people a bit to what was going on out there, because Gary had given no signs to anybody who was, I don't know whether there were people in his very closest circle, but he'd given no signs to anybody in any of his friends, if you like, in any of his friend group, that there was a real time bomb ticking here in his head. And so if I think lots of people said, well, if Gary Speed, handsome, wealthy, wife, 2 great kids, lovely parents, sister, if success, all those things, Wales doing really well, had a fantastic playing career, and widely liked and respected as a footballer, which doesn't always happen. If all that isn't still sufficient for a good, so you don't end up doing this thing, then surely everybody is now potentially in the frame for this. There must be loads more people who find themselves in this position. So it did shine a light on it, I think, and I'm pleased that I've done quite a lot of stuff with people like Andy's Man Club after things that have grown up in the aftermath of all of this, because it hasn't gone away, by the way. It's very much still a thing, but at least there's a recognition, and at least the efforts are underway to try and identify and provide routes for guys in particular who find themselves in this position to get themselves out of this position. That there is a lot more work now being done in this area. I mean, at the end of it all, I have had conversations with, is it 4 or 5 fathers, all vaguely in my circle, either people I've worked with or people I know. And all of those fathers have lost sons to suicide. And I think that's just kind of staggering, that you could have that many people who to whom this has happened. And that just says it's way too prevalent. It's way too common. It's got to be. So anything that's happening now that wasn't happening before is at least some sort of step forward. I'm sure more can be done yet. But if there's any at the end of all of this, and it's a subject that people are still interested in talking about. I get that, even as you say, 14 years on. If there's anything that's happened in those 14 years that is vaguely beneficial, it's just that at least there's a recognition, and at least conversations are now taking place.
Yeah, exactly. Like you say, it has come a long way, but there's still a long way to go as well. And you mentioned you're in Istanbul with that tragic night. Like, even that, playing the next game, that must have had a mental impact on the players and everybody around the club.
Oh yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, they played the game, didn't they, that night, which was just a crazy situation. I mean, people have talked about, as we're chatting now, Liverpool, been on a bad run of form and stuff, but the tragic death of Jota in the summer, that footballers are a close band, and things that can impact the group in ways that you maybe wouldn't expect. So I saw the impact on the Welsh group in the aftermath of Gary's passing, because they were young guys who I did quite a lot of stuff in the aftermath, because they played a tribute game against Costa Rica, and I suggested that we get the players to talk about Gary as part of the Sky kind of build up to that game, and it was a really difficult exercise, and I knew it wasn't going to be challenging. So what I said was, well, the best way to do this probably is to say, you can come and see me if you want. We'll be set up in a room. There'll be a camera in the room. If you want to talk about Gary, we'll be in the room between this time and this time, in the team hotel. This was ahead of the game in Cardiff. Then come and sit down and talk. And not everybody did. But I was never gonna demand, oh, Gareth, we need you to talk about Gary Speed, because I just didn't think it was fair, because these were young guys, early 20s, trying to process something, it's so huge, that I had no right to demand that they come and talk about it. It had to be their decision. So members of the coaching staff came, and some of the players came and talked. And so at least it was the ones who felt strong enough, comfortable enough to come and do that who did it. But you could see that, and the impact of that happening, they just couldn't, it didn't they couldn't comprehend what they just encountered. And it's no wonder, because they were still formulating opinions. They were still, maturing in lots of other ways. That all they knew was football. They didn't talk about stuff like this. And that's the kind of, the impact of those sorts of things on the group. Footballers like to talk about the things footballers talk about. And if they suddenly found themselves in a position like in Istanbul, where all sorts of other considerations come to the fore, I'm sure it was the same with the Liverpool footballers after Hillsborough, and maybe, impact on everybody from something like Heysel as well, that suddenly football it tries to separate itself from real life as much as possible. Most of us who go to football are going to keep ourselves away from real life. It's a real good escape, isn't it?
Yeah.
Generally speaking. It should be anyway. It should be an escape. That's what it's meant for. And so in the instance where you are introduced to what happens in real life, and you can't get away from it, even inside a football stadium, it's there because now this thing has happened. Then everybody finds it really difficult to kind of bring all those, to process all of that sort of stuff. And so in Istanbul, Peter Ridsdale was kind of to the fore in trying to, I think, absorb and shoulder a lot of the burden, so that, how do you ask a young footballer, 19 or 20 or 21 or 22, what do you think about these two Leeds fans being murdered? And you're asking them because they're footballers, but is there, they say it's terrible, it's awful or whatever, but of course which is what you'd expect them to say, but you can't really go beyond that with them, because why would you expect them to have anything that, that is more valuable to say than the parents, for instance, or the wives or their partners or whatever. So I've always tried to be mindful of that in those situations. I found myself in doing work whereby there's usually somebody that is designated or delegated with the role of talking about this thing, because they are more mature maybe, or they can step back a little bit more from it and understand, have a greater understanding, because they've got more life experience, but they've got a greater understanding of how to talk about about these really difficult subjects sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say as well, football is an escapism, but like you mentioned, when the tough times do come as well, you've got that experience from your news experience to sort of to work.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, what were you saying?
Well, yeah, it's a fair point, but still, I mean, another thing that I would say is that I do watch a lot of news reporting, and having been in these situations, maybe it's changed my view a bit. I watch a lot of news reporting where I have a sense that the news reporter is not fully kind of aware of the impact that whatever this thing that they're standing there talking about is having on the people in behind them.
Yeah.
Because you fly in and you fly out again in most instances. You aren't the one who this impacts on. You go and report on, you tell a story of, but you are using that thing to some degree for your own ends, because you're being told by somebody the boss in the office is saying, we need some good stuff on this. We need big pictures of the flood, or we need great pictures of the fire, or whatever, some strong pictures of that. There's that kind of, you end up, if you're not careful, you end up treating everything just as a news story, and forgetting that in every news story there tends to be there's a victim. Usually there's somebody to whom a bad thing has happened here, and it's maybe too easy sometimes for those of us who stand there and talk about it to kind of forget that side of it, and think about the consequences and the long-term implications when you fly back out again and go and do something else. What gets left behind? That's the bit. That's, I suppose, that's a bit more human rather than the news bit. I was never a very good news reporter, so that's from that perspective.
So, you mentioned Sky Sports. How was your time there? Because you started there before it was even a thing, didn't you? Sky Sports News.
Sky Sports News, yeah. Well, I began just before, so I was taken on board to be the correspondent for the Yorkshire area, and we did some trial runs. So the service didn't go live until about October, I think it was, and I started with Sky in August. So I was working in August, September on a new channel that wasn't actually officially accessible by any of the general public at this stage. The only people who could see it were the people back at base in Osterley. So I was working mainly on that as they were making sure it all fitted together properly. And then we went live on whatever date it was, I think in the October. And but nobody had the product in those early stages because Sky Sports News was part of a relaunch, Sky Digital. So they rebranded the product. There was a new type of dish, I think, or to get the new product. So you had to physically change from your old Sky to this new Sky. So they were using Sky Sports News as an inducement to invest in this new product. So if you bought the new product, Sky Digital, you got this 24-hour, 7-day-a-week sports news service. And so that was what its initial value was seen as. So I was doing quite a lot of stuff. Some of these stuff that you covered at the time would go out on Sky Sports because Sky Sports used to do an evening news program. I think it was half an hour, 6 till 6:30, and on a Friday they used to do a show that I'd previously really loved called Sky Sports Centre, which was Friday night 6 till 7, and I thought it was a really good kind of build up to the weekend. And one of the guys I got to know, a guy called Rob McCaffrey, used to do these like big, really worked on pieces for this show, like proper production pieces. He put a lot of time and effort into it, and he'd be given 2 or 3 days to go out and shoot things for it. And I really liked that concept. That's what I wanted to go and do, have a crack at next after doing commentary for a number of years and doing a lot of radio work. I fancied a crack at seeing whether I could create these things like Rob McCaffrey and others who were at Sky at that time were creating. And actually what I found out, though, when Sky Sports News started, actually they didn't really want that sort of stuff anymore. They wanted shorter, much punchier, because it was now all news. There was no big show and the pieces on Sky Sports Centre weren't really news pieces. They were there'd be a player at home. There'd be something like away from the training ground. There'd be a player who likes fishing and you go fishing with them. So you were looking at kind of, there wasn't a news angle to it. It was a feature piece. So you're looking at doing nice features. So here's a footballer not at the training ground was kind of the exercise when we were doing stuff for Sky Sports Centre. But Sky Sports News kind of took over from that concept. So occasionally they would indulge me if I said, "Oh, I've got this idea." I took Dean Windass on the building site and did various things like that down the years to try and give interesting feature pieces where you're giving players a bit of a chance to show themselves away from the thing that you knew them for, hearing them talking about something slightly differently, sharing a different interest they might have. That was the kind of that was the aim. But actually, day to day, because those things took quite a long time to do, you had to set them up, and you might take a long time you might spend all day shooting one of those, and then you might spend a whole day editing one of those. And actually, there just wasn't time in the calendar anymore because Sky Sports News just needed now. It was constant. So if there was a big feature piece that I was pitching to somebody, or there was a story that needed covering today, the priority was always the story that needed covering today. So I didn't quite get the chance that I was looking for to sort of expand too much on that. And actually, Sky Sports Centre changed quite quickly from being this kind of fanfare for the weekend. So it was a Friday night, so we're looking ahead to the big games and telling the stories. Now it was just another hour. You would see this stuff. You weren't cutting a piece now for Sky Sports Centre. You just cutting a piece that was going to go out all day long, possibly on Sky. So that the onus and the emphasis changed completely, and it became a machine that required constant, or a monster that required constant feeding, because it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, which just meant that you were constantly out trying to find more material, and you fed it to the monster ate it, and then the monster demanded more, so off you went and did the next thing. So sometimes you'd end up doing 2 or 3 shoots in a day, never mind, all day shooting one thing. you'd just be going from location to location to location, shooting different stories or reporting on live or whatever. So it was just a complete different kind of way of working. And it kind of, yeah, I mean, yeah, it wasn't what I'd ever remember when I was lying under the duvet cover listening to match commentaries. It wasn't what I'd ever envisaged I'd end up doing. I had trained to be a news reporter, but I'd only done that as a means to an end. And yet, actually, here I was, really being a news reporter now, but on a 24-hour news channel, a rolling news channel as they called them. So there was Sky News and there was Sky Sports News, and the only difference was that we were just talking about football and cricket and rugby league, and they were talking about, I don't know, economic crises and wars and all that sort of thing. But actually, the model was exactly the same. The way it was delivered was exactly the same. And so they wanted you on live as often as possible. So that meant, like that Gary Speed day that I've described, there first thing in the morning and you could be there last thing at night. So you could be there in the dark in the morning and still there in the dark in the evening. So there was a lot of space to fill, a lot of time to fill. And actually not a lot of football to watch because the emphasis was on reporting on stuff between games because they had other people to report on the games. And I'd definitely gone there to watch football. I mean, one of the early incentive for all of this was, can I get in to watch football matches for free? And then can I get paid to go in and watch football matches? Those are the two challenges I set myself. And obviously both of those happened. But there was less opportunity for that to happen at Sky Sports News because it really worked Monday to Friday, Sky Sports News. Although it was on over the weekend, they tended to be using all the footage that was coming in from events that were taking place, like matches and post-match interviews and all the rest of it. And they didn't have any involvement in creating any of that. Sky Sports News just did the newsy bit and other departments did all the football coverage, for instance. So I worked out that I had to get into those other departments to try and get myself into football matches. And I managed to do that. So Soccer Saturday was a big way into that. So there was a sort of regular chance for me to go and watch a game. And it was a bit like commentary because all it was very short bits. It was live. And so you were saying what you were seeing. So that brought the commentary skills in. I did get to do quite a lot of commentary for a long spell at Sky. Probably it doesn't feature much in the archives, but I did all the women's games for a number of years when Sky had the women's football contract. And I did some Premier League foot matches, and I did youth internationals. I did under 21s. So I did a lot of the kind of the other commentary jobs, not the main big commentary jobs, but other ones that maybe the big hitters weren't putting their hands up to, didn't have time to do or whatever. I did quite a lot of them for quite a while, but it never quite materialized into being a full-time thing. And Sky Sports News always had their hooks in me. Basically, they always wanted me to be prioritizing the Sky Sports News stuff. So I got less. I got a lot of commentary, and then I got less as time went on because it was always a bit of a battle for me to be freed up from my Sky Sports News commitments to be let to go off and do this other stuff, from time to time. So the Wales thing obviously was across both because I was doing all the live games, the Wales live games, but I was also reporting on them in the build-up. So that was like a role where I served two masters, both the Sky Sports News people who wanted the build-up to the games and then the live games themselves. I was working on doing all the interviews with players and managers and stuff like that. So there was some crossover, but it was occasionally quite an awkward relationship. But it was it had good bits and it had bad bits.
What are some of your favourite moments working at Sky? Like, can you remember breaking any big news stories that you remember finding out first?
Yeah, there was some. I mean, they loved all the breaking news bit. So I did some news breaking down the years. Trying to think. I mean, there tended to be they weren't earth shattering, but then it was very difficult for Sky Sports News to get huge exclusives because even at that time, exclusives was something that newspapers did, and Sky Sports News didn't have the time as a Sky Sports News reporter, as I've just described. You were so busy, you didn't really have the time to get into a story, to spend time to kind of research and quietly in the background encourage people to talk and to get a sense. I mean, I had some good stories that never saw the light of day, because when I described them to people at Sky, they could see that it was problematic, they was going to need some work, that there might be some pushback from the people who it was about, and that might cause issues. So then they just wasn't the time really to delve deeply into stuff like that. I think that was one of the things that prevented them getting lots of big stories. And the other bit was that needing to build up that trust thing that I've talked about. That takes time, and you have to expend energy and do that. And lots of it, because we were so in and out with so many of the things we did at Sky Sports News, we had to get it done quick, turn it around quick, get it back to the office. That time wasn't there to do that kind of thing either. So yeah, anyway, so yes, there were. I broke some stories. Nothing that was ever going to win me a Pulitzer Prize, but just a lot of it was around like Wales stuff, because I had really good contacts in the Wales camp and the group. Off the top of my head, that nothing that's really worth kind of. I mean, there were things like I knew that who the replacement for John. Well, I knew that Gary Speed was going to be John Toshet's replacement. That was an exclusive, because I'd been involved in the process when nobody else knew it was happening. So yes, there was an exclusive, but I didn't really get a chance to break that news as a big exclusive, because I kind of agreed with everybody that I wouldn't, because it would have been slightly awkward for people, because they were worried about being accused of tapping up and stuff like that. So actually, the big exclusive that I did know about, I had to kind of sit on a little bit. I was allowed to kind of do it, but not in the big loud way that it would have been if it was the Sun or the Daily Mirror doing it. So there were things around the Wales camp. I got one game. I knew that nobody else knew that Gareth Bale was injured and was a big game for Wales, and he wasn't going to play. I got wind of that from a conversation with somebody involved in the Welsh setup the night before, and got to announce that one the following day. So you occasionally found things like that. You just had to make a value judgment on what was worth putting out as a big exclusive story, given that you were probably, usually with an exclusive, you upset somebody because you're saying something that you're not supposed to say, or at a time when you're not supposed to say it. Peter Reid, when he was announced as the next Leeds manager, I had a tip off about that, so I did that one as an exclusive. And I'd also heard about a tale about a scrap in the dressing room at around about the same time as well. So I think I did something on that. Anyway, I mean, they were kind of, it was fairly insignificant, frankly, in the great scheme of things. But I wasn't driven by that. Others at Sky Sports News, that was the be all and the end all to them. That was never the be all and the end all to me, because if I thought it was going to break a bond of trust I had, I'd be more inclined to think, well, is it worth breaking the bond of trust? Because I rely on these people quite often in going forward, to give me the useful information, background information, because we always had access to things. We often had access to things like team news and stuff. You might, when I was doing commentaries in those days, you'd quite often ring the manager and get hold of the manager the day before and get the team off him. I don't think it happens now. Certainly it doesn't when I do commentaries, but you do that. That was quite a common occurrence. So that was valuable information that you had there. You had the team before anybody else knew it. But obviously, I knew from having done it myself as a commentator, I knew that the trust element there was that I am not going to reveal this. And the manager would sometimes say, "No, you're not going to let this go, are you?" And you'd have to swear that you weren't, because if you did, you were done.
Yeah.
You were never going to get that off him or anybody else again in future, because word would go around quickly. So I had that as a mindset. I'd use that. I'd use the link with the managers to help me out, and there were rules effectively involved with stuff like that. And so I came in with that perspective, whereas a lot of the, if a news reporter had got hold of the team, and it did occasionally happen, they would go, "I'm going to tell everybody," and they'd put it out there, which then, meant that nobody got it the next time.
Yeah.
And that's probably why we don't make calls to managers anymore to get team use, because that probably happened too often for them to be happy to do it. So those, there was always the exclusive thing. That was never my driver there. Occasionally you came across some stuff that was, nobody else knew, but that wasn't what I didn't get kind of big kicks. I liked covering big stories, and I did get. It was useful to be able to, at the time, lots of the Leeds takeover stuff. Times with that, I was getting calls from all sorts of people, different interested parties, all wanting to put their own spin on it, all wanting to give me loads of information so that I could put that out there on the TV because it would be beneficial to them. But then I had to weigh up which information was kind of wholly from their perspective here. What was the balanced view? Or maybe I had to go and find the balanced view and say, these say this, what do you think? So I was put in situations where I was getting an awful lot of information coming to me, and I had to sift through that and try and present it in the right manner, to make sure that I reflected it correctly and truthfully. And even you get stuff like, agents might call and say, listen, can you mention that X is available for, or is being linked with da da da, and they'd be using you as a kind of a source to potentially plant bits of information out there. So there was quite a lot going on, because people could see that there was a route for them to get into public with little nuggets of useful information. So you were quite often having to work out what to do with this stuff that you were being told, that could have been seen as exclusives as well at the time. I can exclusively reveal that X is being linked with a move to Y kind of thing. But I always usually fell down on the side of being cautious and not being seen as a kind of an easy route or an easy tool for people. So, which probably didn't do me any favours in terms of the perception of my performance at Sky Sports News. But that's just that was the strategy that I put in place. I was there quite a long time. So,
did you enjoy your time on Soccer Saturday? Because that used to be an iconic programme.
Yeah, I loved it. That was my favourite. I think you asked me about favourite moments. That was my favourite collective thing that I did there. So getting on to Soccer Saturday, getting a call to go and do games initially for them was a big thing, because I'd really wanted to do that. I was seeking that out, and they were separate to Sky Sports News, although it went out on the channel. Initially it didn't, but then it did. It was run by a complete different department, and so you were booked by a different department, and it was run in a different way. And the producer was a really great guy. A guy called Ian Condren produced it. It was a brilliant show, and it had Jeff Stelling on it, and so that was like the icing on the cake, because every Saturday you got to listen to Jeff. I didn't do the full 6 hours because I didn't get to the stadium till usually about 1:30, but you got to listen to what happened after kickoff. And it was, whether sometimes you did no reports, or maybe you did one report because it was a particularly boring 0-0 or whatever. So you might hardly be on telly at all, but still being part of it and hearing it all, and the way that Jeff was presenting it all, that was a privilege to be involved in all of that. It was to be involved in a brilliant show like that. And I think at the time, at its height, it was easily the best sports show, not just the best football show. It was the best sports show on television. To have a little part in that was something I was really happy, really pleased about. But just to be involved in it and to be recognised as being involved in it was good in itself, because it was such a good show. And when it was like on the good days, when it was all popping off and things were happening left, right, and centre, and your game might go mad, and mad things might happen in that. And Jeff was just is the absolute master at finding the right thing to mention, the right note, the right question to ask, and just bring out a bit more from it. His reaction to it all was just masterful. He was the best sports presenter on telly by an absolute mile.
Yeah.
And every Saturday afternoon, you saw it on that show. It was just, yeah, it was brilliant to be on it.
You know when you're in the ground, so you've got a monitor with the game on, I'm guessing, and then you've got your earpieces. So are you listening to Jeff and the producer as well then?
Yeah. So you've got loads going on. That was one of the challenges, because you've got to keep across everything, kind of thing. And you'd get the shout from the desk, the gallery rather, to say, we're coming to you in 10 seconds. And then you had maximum, probably usually, unless something very strange had happened or big had happened, you usually have about 15 seconds to get the report done. 15, 20 seconds maybe. And any time after that, you get shouted at in your ear, wrap up, hand back, wrap up. So you've got to stop talking, kind of thing, because the pace of the show was absolutely crucial. What they didn't want was me rabbiting on for a minute and a half about some near miss that I'd just seen at Middlesbrough, because that would just pull all the pace of the programme completely right down. It was like, it's got to be like that. We're on to something else is like, whoa, what's happened here? We're going there, It had to, that's what made it, it wouldn't have been interesting otherwise. That's what gave it the energy that kept people watching all afternoon in huge numbers as well.
Yeah.
So you had all that going on. And one of the biggest challenges of doing it, one of the advantages I had, because I'd done a lot of football commentary before, was often things would happen while they'd say, we're coming to you in 10 seconds, because there might have been a big chance, because they had match feeds where they could see them as well in the gallery. So they've got all this bank of screens in front of them. They can see all the different games and stuff. And they would say, all right, we're coming to you for an update in 10. And then even as you're preparing to say there's just been a big chance because they hit the crossbar or whatever, you'd be talking, and you've got, as you just described, you've got a monitor screen, usually, not every time, but most times you had a monitor screen in front of you. So you've got to keep an eye on that as well, because you can hear the crowd noise go up as you're talking. You glance down and then something happens right in front of your eyes. And you've got to describe that. You go, oh, hold on a second. There's a goal. Don't believe it. Crossing from the right hand side. You've got to try and work out who the goal scorer is instantly as well. So you come on to talk about this thing that just happened, but now you find yourself talking about this thing that is now happening. And that was when that's when it's at its hardest, but that was when it was at its best as well. And that's when the fact that I'd done a lot of commentary work, which was relatively unusual. There weren't too many of the reporters on Soccer Saturday had been commentators before, but that's when that commentary element was really useful, because I was used to trying to describe things live and get the build up in how did the ball come in and what sort of ball was it, and trying to work out, all right, there's a crowd of players celebrating, who is it that I think has got the goal here, those sorts of things. You've got to do it all like that. You've got no time to think about this. You've got no processing period. You've just got to get straight into it and call it, because that's the way the show worked. So that was I loved that. That was, if you got a good game with stuff like that happening, there was nothing better.
How does it get organised? Who's going to what game?
There's a director, and he will be thinking, well, director, producer, they'll be, where have we not been? Or the big game, right? So that the guys in the studio would be at the biggest games. So the panel is watching the big matches. So they'll be, most often you'd expect, going to them. And then after that, I mean, I never did Premier League games. Us knockabout reporters were never allowed to do Premier League games, or incredibly rarely. So we were always doing Championship or below level. So you could do anything. You could do Championship, League One, League Two. I've been all over the place to different grounds doing this. So we were always given those games. But what was great about Soccer Saturday was that those games almost felt like they had equal status with the Premier League matches. Because if you got a really good lower league game, it didn't matter where it was. If there was some mad stuff going on and it ended 5-4 or whatever, you'd become a big story by the end of the show, because Jeff would be giving it plenty about, oh my word, I don't believe it. It's something else has happened at Barnet or whatever. So we'll cross there now. And so that game became something that people would remember, because even though there'd been Manchester Derby or whatever taking place at the same time, the game that was the mad one was the one that you happened to be at, where this crazy thing happened. So all those Chris Kamara games that everybody's got the clips from, none of them were the big game of the day. It was just the Cammy the Cammy game of the day, where Chris, by various means, managed to kind of insert more drama even than was actually happening behind him, for missing things, sort of stuff that I'd have been fired for, frankly, but different rules applied. I understand that. So you were doing a game that may become, that's when you arrived at the stadium not knowing how it was going to play out, this one. You might do one report all afternoon, or you might be on every 3 minutes because the goals kept flying in, or 3 players got sent off, or whatever it might be. So one of the times that happened, and one of the times that I really enjoyed on Soccer Saturday, was a Leeds game. It was Leeds v Ipswich. It was the final home game of the season. Leeds were in danger of going down to Division 3 for the first time ever, League 1 as it is now. And at the same time, Hull were playing away at Cardiff, and they were the other team that could go down. So those 2 results were key. I think Leeds had to win it to have a chance of staying up. Anyway, so I'm reporting on the game. That's the story. Leeds could be relegated today, and probably were going to be, because it was going to take a sort of an unusual set of circumstances. But they had a chance, and they took the lead, I think, against Ipswich. So it was now dependent on the Hull Cardiff score. So we were reflecting that through the course of the afternoon. And then Ipswich equalised at Ellen Road. People may remember this, and fans came on the pitch, quite a significant pitch invasion. Leeds fans came on the pitch, and the referee signal for the players took them off the pitch. It was really close to the end of the game, about a minute and a half from the end of the game. So the referee signal for all the players to come off the pitch. So they all left the pitch, and the press agency, all the scores that you see on the ticker thing on Skype were coming in from PA. They are people who were feeding in the official scores there from all the grounds. And they put on the ticker, as I remember it, that the game was over. They felt the referee had finished the game because of this pitch invasion. It was so close to the end. So I think they put it up as full time. But I didn't think that had happened. I was pretty convinced in my own mind that he'd just taken them off the pitch. And whilst they cleared the pitch, and it took quite a while to get everybody off the pitch, like 15 minutes or something, my sense was that he was going to bring the players back out to finish the game. So I had to back my own judgment on that. So that Soccer Saturday, obviously now, there's a big story coming here. So they come to me and say, what's happening? I'm stuck on the gantry, so I've got no sense of what's going on down the tunnel, which was the only place you'd get that kind of information. We had nobody working in the tunnel who could feed that information to me. So I had to make a call, and my call was, I don't think this game's over. I'm pretty sure it's not. I think he's going to bring them back out again. And I was right. Luckily, I was right. So he did bring the players back out again, and they played the final minute and a half. In the meantime, I'd been getting a call from Cardiff, I think we're still at Ninian Park at the time, where Hull were playing, because I knew Adam Pearson, the owner of Hull City. I knew him pretty well. He used to be at Leeds, and he was calling me saying, what the hell is going on? Because they were waiting for the outcome. If it's 1-1, they stay up. So he's saying, what the hell is going on? They're saying it's full time. I said, I don't think it is. I don't think this one's finished. So he said they were all the players, the Hull players at Cardiff were all standing, watching Soccer Saturday, waiting for the report. They wanted the full-time report from Leeds United. And if you can never get a greater sense of, this thing than that you're the person who's going to tell them whether they're staying up or going down here. And that's when you realize, the kind of pressure of it, how significant it is, because on my words, they either go leaping around celebrating, or they're dejected and disconsolate. And so, yes, the players came out, so I was right. I'd made the right call on that one, and they did play the minute and a half or whatever was left, and then the full-time whistle went, and then I was finally able to report and unfortunately confirm Leeds United's relegation all at the same time, and Hull City were now safe. So they're all leaping around at Ninian Park celebrating, and at Ellen Road, obviously the place is like a morgue. So it's those, you get put in those situations sometimes because it's all live, and like I say, you never know what's going to happen in the midst of a game, and you have no control over it. You've just got to be ready to react to it. I had another game, too many stories, but I had another game where we didn't know why a goal had been disallowed, and I think it was from a penalty that the referee should have awarded to be retaken, but for some reason he gave a goal kick and just couldn't fathom why he'd done this. That was at Newcastle when they were in the Championship. And again, I had no idea what had actually happened. I had to make a guess and make a call. And that was one of the games they actually came to me at half time to talk about that one, because we couldn't work out what had just happened here. The sequence just didn't make any sense. So I had to not sound stupid. I had to come up with something plausible. And as it turned out, I again, luckily made the right call. I'd said, I think the referee's just made a really huge error here. And that's exactly what had happened. He made the wrong call, completely the wrong call. And it was confirmed after the game. But we didn't know for any of the second half until I got down in the tunnel and interviewed Rafa Benitez, who said, yeah, that's what happened. So you find yourself kind of, you're on your own with this stuff, but you've got to find something to say all the time. You've got to try and be knowledgeable or try and give information.
Well, you were always wanted the commentary job. Obviously, you did it on Radio Leeds, but now you're doing it on LUTV since 2019. How's that going?
Yeah, it's going well. Mostly. I love it when Leeds win. It's a bit more difficult. We've already described when Leeds United lose, but we had two fantastic. I've been lucky. I don't think there's many in the kind of commentary role who've seen two promotions. I've seen Leeds get into the Premier League twice now. I'm hoping I won't be doing two relegations, obviously. And we've had some fantastic. It's been a privilege because last season in particular, it was great in the Bielsa season, but it finished strangely because of lockdown and all the rest of it. It meant that people couldn't celebrate and all the rest of it like they should have been able to do. So it was a really big experience.
Did that affect your commentary with COVID? How you?
To an extent, it probably did. I mean, what you were finding was, so the Pablo Hernandez goal that was done in that period, the lockdown goal when Leeds won away at Swansea, which is a game that a lot of Leeds fans probably refer to. And they refer to it because the only place you could see it was on LUTV. This was like a unique situation. Sky decided not to do the game. So literally the only place you could watch it was Leeds United TV or Swansea City TV. And so it was the first time ever that clubs had like complete exclusivity on over like a game that would normally have been a big game and would have been on Sky. So you had to come, and plus obviously nobody could get in the ground either, and there was huge interest on it from the Leeds perspective for certain. So that commentary that on the Pablo Hernandez goal is me in an almost empty stadium shouting, and it was, when you think about it, if I'd been watching myself do that, I think, what is this idiot doing here? Because he's just sitting he's just shouting, and everybody could hear every word. Yeah. And the Guardian guy was sitting obviously a couple of rows ahead of me in the media seats, and he was mentioning it, and he was doing this minute by minute updates for the Guardian website, and he mentioned my sort of madness in that, or whatever, the craziness. So it was that's what was strange about it, was the fact that you were talking at a level that you'd normally talk at in a full football stadium, but you were doing it in a completely empty football stadium. So actually it meant all the stewards and people who are just standing around were hearing every word. And that's a bit weird, because it's not meant to be like that. You're meant to be, the voice is not being heard by the people around you because there's all the other distractions going on, kind of thing. So that was odd. I don't think it particularly changed the way we did things, but it was odd. The whole thing was a very strange experience, but surreal, really. Yeah. So they got promoted in that surreal atmosphere, and then the whole of the next Premier League season, incredible, was done in that atmosphere. So all those great results that Leeds had, nobody got to see it or cheer about it. So it was good. I got to all the games, but it wasn't the full experience. It wasn't. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't as enjoyable as it should have been.
Yeah. What was your favourite? What's been your favourite moment?
The best moment is when we got out of all of that nonsense, and the best moment probably is the goal at Plymouth in the last game of last season, because you can, if you've all your life you've wanted to be a commentator, or you've done commentary or whatever, you can't create a better scenario than that, to go into added time in the last game of the season with the other team currently winning the league. And then you've done every single game all season. So you've been all over up and down the country, and Leeds have missed out agonisingly the season before. And here you are in the final few minutes. So promotion's already been done, but there was a bus tour already planned, and the bus tour was taking place, and we'd already had conversations about it's going to be a bit flat, the bus tour, if they don't win the league. And I was actually thinking about things like that in the second half, when it didn't look like Leeds were going to get beyond the equaliser. And then all of a sudden, Manor Solomon dances through and scores the goal, and you get to describe it, and that's the bit. And then all the stuff that followed on from that, like on the pitch with the players, and then the bus itself as well. So that opened the door to kind of all of that in many ways, and that's probably my best commentary moment. Probably, I'd guess, arguably of the lot, frankly, because it just everything came together, and to be in position. It's a bit like the Pablo Hernandez goal. You're the guy lucky enough to have the opportunity to describe that big moment. That's the privilege of it.
You mentioned that obviously the COVID season went up. Did you ever have a lot of interaction with Bielsa?
None at all.
Really?
Never, ever spoke to him. No, I waved at him in Wetherby once, and that was it.
Did he wave back?
Well, I'm not even sure. Yeah, I think he did, yeah. But, just like and then his head would be down again. No, never spoke to him.
Really?
And that was incredibly unusual. I mean, obviously, it's not just unusual; it's utterly unique. Because now we whoever the manager is since, we interview them on a regular basis. But never ever spoke to him. No, not. I don't know if he had any idea who I was. It didn't matter.
What did he just say? He wasn't doing interviews on LUTV like that?
Yeah, he just wouldn't do any LUTV stuff. So I think he did one interview in the time he was there, which appeared in the documentary. But he just wouldn't do any stuff with LUTV. He would do only do things that he was contracted to do. So that meant sort of Sky type stuff. He would do that, as you saw, through an interpreter. But I don't think he did many. He was meant to be available to do like sit down interviews in the build up to games and stuff as part of the Sky contract, but I'm not sure he did those. So no, he just wasn't something that he wanted to do. So the football was great. I don't think that bit was particularly great, but that's the way, I guess that's the way he works. So, whilst it was going fantastically well in that period, and for most of it was, I think, people would kind of tolerate that. But it's probably harder when things are not going well, because actually that's also when fans are demanding a bit more in terms of by way of explanation, so if you're not talking to anybody when things have gone a bit wrong, then it's probably potentially going to be used in evidence against you in terms of decisions that people in boardrooms are making.
So, on this season, how do you think it's going? Obviously, we're in the relegation zone. We've been playing well, but just results haven't gone our way, have they?
No, they haven't. Not by and large, they haven't. Anyway, but so it's been a mixed bag. I mean, I thought the Leeds played well enough against Villa. I don't think it was anything like it was much better performance than the Forest away, for instance. And there were better signs, more encouraging signs in terms of the approach that is required, I think, in terms of what the players that they've signed there. So hopefully that they've found a way that they can make themselves difficult to beat, which has been the aim, as I understand it, of the recruitment. And if you do make yourself difficult to beat, you've actually got to be that thing. You have got to be difficult to beat, because you've set up to do things in a certain way. So hopefully there's working through that on the training ground, really, to put it together, I think, and then we'll see signs of that at some point. And the sooner the better, frankly, because I've done enough Premier League games, lots of different clubs down the years, and it's absolutely brutal as a league, and it does not get any easier, right? So second half of the season, I did a lot of work with Hull City. First half of the season, where they something like third or whatever they were at probably on Boxing Day, and in the second half of the season, I think they won one more game, and they stayed up on the final day of the season. So they were looking like they were heading for Europe, and they barely hung on to their place in the top division, as it turned out. So that second half is even more challenging than the first half, because the players become, every game is so hard that if you've got a group of players who are finding it difficult anyway, it just becomes more and more like every game is so intense that I think players just kind of crumble. I've seen it with a number of clubs that I've been covering who've been relegated. The players they just can't keep doing it week in, week out. It just becomes too much. So it's not the physical bit that gets them necessarily, it's the mental side of it. So you need to give yourself a fighting chance through that in that second half to keep everybody kind of switched on to this concept that you can do this thing. Everyone's got to still believe, because the minute you stop believing, you're kind of done then.
The thing as well is we're being dragged into the relegation zone now. It's always hard to get back out in it. So, and especially with this run we've got coming up, could be a bit of a gap by the end of it.
It's possible. And that's what I mean about, you've got to still believe that you can do it, right? And that's the bit, the manager has that job to do with the group, to convince them that, listen, there's a route out of this.
Yeah.
So what you want to see over the next 3 or 4 matches with Leeds, what I think probably would be centering on, in a way more than usually you're talking about result, is in the Premier League way more important than performance. You can have an absolute dog of a day, but if you get a point or a win, doesn't matter. That's fantastic. But in the next few games, it might switch a little bit, because what you want to see is a group that's got, because the caliber of the opposition is so high, that you want to see that in the group there's the thing you need when the caliber of the opposition isn't quite so high. So it might be that performances for the next few games become significant, whereas results are going to be difficult.
That's what's more frustrating, like you mentioned, Villa at the weekend. First half, we were miles a better team. And then you've got games like, what have we game? Bournemouth, we should have won. Apart from Arsenal, Burnley, and Forest, I think we've been the better team in the other games. But like you say, performances don't win games, do they?
No, Brighton wasn't great.
Oh, Brighton as well, yeah, I forgot about that.
I mean, the frustration for everybody is that there've been a few games where Leeds have been in the lead, or so we're level with Forest in the second half. We're level with Fulham in the 95th minute or whatever it was. We're winning against Bournemouth in the 93rd, 4th minute or whatever it was. We're winning against Villa at half time. Those are games where you've got to turn that into something. There has to be a return. When you've got yourself into that positive position, you've got to get a return on that. And so the slips become all the more significant when you don't. Because that takes away your opportunity to write off games further down the line. So Leeds go into a game against Manchester City hoping that they don't really need to get anything from it, because they've got enough points in the bank already that this isn't a big problem. But they're not in that situation. They actually genuinely do need to try and get something from this game this weekend, and the one after, and the one after that, because they're in that position. They're in the bottom 3 and they want to get out of it as quickly as possible. So that's where you're actually going into a game against Manchester City and think, well, we need to try and get something here. And you would say that anyway every week, but the reality is, in most occasions, you're probably not going to get anything.
Yeah.
But that because West Ham are at home. Say, I assume they were away last weekend. West Ham are at home. If West Ham win, and Leeds are at Manchester City, West Ham have the chance from being level points to be 3 points ahead.
Yeah.
That's when it starts to get more difficult.
Yeah, it would be Leeds to go to Man City and get a result. They're just one of those. You never know with Leeds, but it's just not looking likely at the minute, is it? But hopefully we turn things around.
Let's hope so, eh?
Just to finish off, I've got a few quick fire questions. Either as a fan or professionally, what is the best game that you've seen live?
Oh, blimey. That's I've seen thousands. So how do I pick one out? Probably one of the games at the Euros, Euro 2016. So I will say, I'll say Belgium v Wales in the quarter final. I was there for that, and yeah, that was brilliant.
Who's the best player that you've ever seen?
Um, wow. Uh, I I'd probably go for Ian Rush
Really?
because I thought he was just such a brilliant goal scorer. I've never seen Messi play in the flesh. I'd only pick people I've seen in the flesh.
Yeah.
Giggs was very good, but overall, I'll go for Ian Rush.
Best goal?
The best goal I've ever seen is Mark Hughes, and it was for Wales against Spain at the racecourse. Wales beat Spain 3-0. I think it was 1985, and Mark Hughes scored an overhead volley from outside or on the edge of the penalty area, and it was incredible.
Best stadium?
Well, I love Ellen Road. It's great. It's falling to bits, but I love it. But in terms of, I suppose, you looking at it from the kind of spectacular element. I mean, I've been to quite a lot of the big ones. Some of the newer ones I've not been to. So I don't know. Where would I say? I mean, the racecourse is another place very close to my heart, Wrexham's ground. So I love walking in both those places. So I'm not going to go for the kind of the glitz and the glamour. I'm going to go for the place that feels like a stadium should feel. So I'll pick both of those.
Best fans that you've seen?
Oh, geez. Well, again, close to home, Leeds fans are a different breed, and that's a big part of why I love going to Ellen Road. And they've been really great with me, so that's been fantastic. I thank them enormously for that. I mean, I've been in stadiums with like really big noise, and that Belgium Wales game I mentioned, the scenes in the build up to that game with the Belgian fans around the town of Lille where the game was played were just incredible. There were tens of thousands of them there, and the scenes that I witnessed, they obviously thought they were going to beat Wales because they were celebrating even way before the game had even kicked off. But we had a great day with them. They were really good company, and they were magnanimous in defeat as well. So I'll stick them in just that because that occasion stands out in the memory because of all of that great stuff that happened.
Your favourite commentary moment from yourself and one like as a fan watch somebody else?
So I guess I have to go with the probably on the balance of it the Manor Solomon goal, just because it's most fresh in the memory maybe, and then from somebody else, iconic commentary. There's some commentary I know very well because I watch like clips of goals over and over again. And also, there are moments when I was involved in covering games, working on games, and I was like hearing the commentary. So Bill Leslie was the commentator on all the Wales games when Wales qualified. That's one of the big ones in my career when Wales qualified for the Euros, and I did all the games, and I was on the pitch with the players when it happened, when they actually finally qualified in Bosnia. So one of my favourite bits of commentary is Bill Leslie confirming, and I heard it in my headphones, that the full-time whistle had gone in the game between Israel and Cyprus. And the fact that Cyprus had won that game meant that Wales had finally qualified for a summer tournament for the first time since 1958. So that moment of commentary is one of the best that I've ever, because it meant so much.
Yeah, well, that's all. And thank you so much for your time, Bryn. It's been brilliant to have you all as a guest.
You're very welcome.
Nice one, thank you.
Cheers.